Welcome to another Pint with Seaniebee. This is a grey Sydney afternoon. It's, what day is it, Andy? Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday afternoon in Sydney. I've got a great guest with me, a good friend of mine, a guy I've known for many years. He's been all over the world in advertising. He's a gamer, he's a writer, he's a raconteur, a family man. We have a lot of interesting things from this guy today, I'm sure. So without further ado, welcoming to the podcast my good friend Andy Flemming.
Nice to be here and nice to actually have a pint in my hand.
Yes, let's do the clink. Don't tell anyone that I'm drinking vodka soda.
Can I just say that I'm very pleased to actually have a pint in my hands?
Just that? Why?
Well, no, I'm just saying that I think a pint of Seaniebee, well, I've heard a distinct lack of pints being involved. So I'm pleased to actually have a pint in my hand with Seaniebee.
Well, we're in a bar here, so apologies if there's a lot of background noise, and I'll probably gonna have to try and pick up and make lots of changes with noise reduction, etc., which was what happened. So I started doing a few of them in quiet environments, but this seems to be coming out okay.
Where have you been doing them, by the way? Where have you been doing this?
I've been doing them in all over the world. I've got 2 in Nicaragua, I've got Ireland, I've got Paris, I've got here, I'm going to be doing some in Singapore. I'm on a world tour, so there you go. You've been in Australia for how long now?
Got it. I actually worked out the other day that I've spent, I think, half my life in Australia now. Yeah, so it'd be about 23 years. A fucking long time.
Andy works as probably the, I don't know, second or third most senior creative in M&C Saatchi, who actually, when I was leaving Sydney, were on a spiral downward, and over the last 10 years you've...
A spiral downward?
Well, you'd lost loads of business and it was dodgy, and then suddenly you guys came roaring back to the point where you're now, I think, for probably 4 straight years or 5 straight years, the most successful and best company in Australia. What happened there?
I think a lot of factors. I think we obviously had Tom McFarlane and Tom Derry, who are remarkable players in advertising, and I think they obviously started the company. James Leggett, the new CEO, was something fresh and something new. I mean, the guy is about 30. God, I think he's about 34. But the amazing thing about James Leggett is that, and this is totally true, he'll fucking hate me for saying this. He was the body double for Kevin Szabo as Hercules in the New Zealand production of Xena Warrior Princess. Anyway, he was CEO of Ogilvy in London, and he came over, and I think his youth, and I think his vitality, and I think his hunger pushed itself out amongst the agency and gave us a new direction, and obviously it worked because we did some really good work.
So for those of you who don't know what M&C Saatchi is, M&C Saatchi is the business that was set up when the Saatchi brothers, so I'm sure most of you have heard of Saatchi and Saatchi, one of the most famous ad agencies in the world. And back in the day, the brothers were kicked out of their own company in a sort of Steve Jobs-like coup, and they immediately set up their own company back in the early 90s. So tell me about, you were talking about this thing called Clever Boy. Tell people what that's all about.
So Clever Boy was an agency initiative where we wanted to try and smash together 2 of our clients, one of which was Google, one of which was Optus, for the mutual benefit of both. And this idea came out that with the help of a company that we found in Perth called Shark Mitigation Systems, who had this idea that there could be a buoy that basically floats in the ocean and basically sends out a signal and works out the kind of fish that are in the area through sonar. And it differentiates dolphins from sharks and debris from sharks. And so what it does is basically picks up when a shark's in the area and then sends a signal through the Optus network to a centre that can then actually alert the guys on the beach that there's actually a large shark in the area. So
are these buoys now being put in place?
Obviously it's a prototype at the moment, and it's actually in the water. If they can actually go through the vigorous testing that the government requires, we hope that they're on every beach.
Can you make one for spiders and snakes?
No, I think I think you've got to deal with it if you live in Australia.
All of you are afraid to come to Australia because it's got the most vicious animals in the world. At least there's one less one that you have to worry about.
I actually saw a spider the size of my fucking hand in my toilet the other day.
Happen.
One of the worst things about living in Australia is working out how to get rid of these things. Baygon just doesn't do it.
No.
It won't affect them. What you got to do is you've got to try and have the guts to put a pint glass over it and then slip the card underneath, and then you've got this gigantic thing sort of screaming around, and then you've got to sort of
and
throw
it's damn
it.
mad then.
It's mad. And then you've got to throw it into your garden.
What was your where were you from actually? I don't really know this.
I'm from Brighton.
Are you really?
Yeah,
my sister
Brighton.
lives in Brighton. Hello, Carol, if you're listening.
I'm actually from Cuckfield, and then I moved to a place called Lewis.
Right. And what was it like growing up there?
Fucking fantastic. I mean, Brighton was amazing. I mean, it's cosmopolitan, it's fun, it's gay, it's like, it's.
And what were your folks doing?
My dad worked in a brewery. He was in the Royal Navy for many, many years. Then he worked for Harvey's Brewery in Lewis. My mum was working in social services, so dealing with abused kids and that kind of thing. So I think when I decided to get into advertising, the two of them found the whole concept quite baffling. They didn't really understand what advertising was.
Yeah, mine too, yeah. Were you creative in school?
Yeah.
I always have you as the sort of guy in school who's got like a little notebook full of little robots and stuff like that.
I was famous for writing very imaginative stories. And I was the first kid in primary school to read all the books in the library. Yeah, I got a little fucking award for that.
Yeah. You were saying to me that your ambition when you were a kid was to open a bookshop.
It was, and it sort of still is. But unfortunately, I go into bookshops now and take pictures of books and then buy them on Kindle. So I think I've just destroyed the idea of me.
It's quite strategic what you could be doing, though. Close down the bookshops yourself through your power of reading, only to then re-emerge 15 years later with the most beautiful old-style bookshop when it becomes retro and everyone just flocks to it.
I genuinely think bookshops are going to come back. I think there's something amazing about a book with an amazing cover. There's something magical about being recommended a book and then opening it up and then knowing that you're going to spend the next week, 2 weeks immersed. That was the kind of thing that got me into advertising. I think it was reading a shitload. And
did you read for college? Did you go to college?
No, I didn't. No, I wasn't allowed to.
I didn't go to college either.
No, I was my parents, but I fucked around so much in school, and I failed so many exams. So I wasn't allowed to go to university because my parents said you're just gonna spend all your money on dope, really, which was probably true.
Yeah.
But I think what it did was it did accelerate the need for me to get some kind of trade. What I chose to do, which was against the will of my family, was to spend all the money I had going up to the best agencies in London and calling the best creative directors in London so often that they just got so utterly sick.
It was a war of attrition.
Yeah, until they got so utterly sick of the fact that this guy was calling them, they'd eventually see me. And I literally spent, I think, maybe 3 years learning the craft from some very great names.
So what was your first job?
I guess it was Sydney, because I don't class being a junior in London agencies as being a job. I mean...
But how the hell did that work? 'Cause
we actually came here because England was just so shit at the time.
We being who?
Me and Christy Peacock, my art director.
Okay.
And he moved to Australia about 6 months before I did, and he actually called me up. And I think I was temping at the time to make money. Right. He called me up on the phone, and I was literally about to walk to the bus station to get a bus to Eastbourne and do this shitty temping job. And he said, yeah, I'm on Bondi Beach and I'm just going off for beers and it's wonderful and it's sunny, and anyway, bye. And it was that phone call that made me go, fuck it, I'm going to move to Australia. And
right.
6 weeks I was there.
What age was that?
I would have been 21,
right,
22.
Okay. So were you scared doing that?
No.
Right.
No, I think I had to leave. I think England was awful. I met Christy in Sydney in 92, and we got a job in what was then Shite Day Mojo. But simply by walking in, unbeknownst to them, and essentially living at the agency, to the point where our smelly socks were hanging up on the washing
I remember
line.
you're quite known for that because the same thing happened.
We really did. I really did live at Mojo for a long time, and I existed.
Did they know you were living
No,
there?
they didn't.
You were like an indigent.
No.
He worked so hard.
But what they didn't realise is we had Findus, and what it meant was that upstairs, obviously, we had this fridge freezer
Fish fingers.
filled with Findus, and I fucking lived off that stuff. And they had a microwave, and they had all these Findus products that obviously the agents.
So they just think that you were working really hard because you were
yeah,
always there.
but I was existing there.
Where did you sleep?
Sometimes in the agency.
Where?
Well, look, I had a sofa in my office, and I slept there, and we ate there. We had a huge bar there, and we had these amazing meatloaf things that we used to carve off, and so essentially I lived off cheese, meatloaf, VB,
Tea.
and Findus products that I stole from the freezer.
Well, you then did move to Singapore, right?
Yeah.
What was that? What caused that?
Well, I was coming to the end of my 1-year work visa in Sydney, and I wanted to stay, but obviously being quite young and having very little experience, it wasn't really on the cards for me to get sponsorship, so I needed to get something. And at the time, Hong Kong and Singapore were looking for expats.
Yeah.
And I went through a lot of interviews, and Esther Clarahan found a job for me in what was then BSB Singapore with Rob Gibraltar, who you've interviewed.
You actually were mentioned. You ended up on the cutting room floor of that conversation.
Really?
Yeah,
I was cut out of your.
That was because I knew
podcast.
I'd be talking to you anyway. So,
but phenomenal,
gentleman.
a phenomenal man, and I actually still have his letter offering me the job in BSB Singapore, which was a wonderful letter. And
that's where we have massive. He was the guy who took me out of Dublin.
Really?
To get to join him at Beatty Ads, yeah.
No,
so
he
hired both of us.
No, Rob Gibraltar is the Bill Clinton of advertising.
Yeah, very good.
I remember walking in on a Saturday morning once, and he was in shorts with his feet up on his desk playing a saxophone. It was amazing. He was absolutely fucking amazing.
Yeah,
This guy was legendary. I love Rob Gibraltar. Being 22, 23, and moving from Australia, England into Asia, with no friends, no family, it's a huge fucking thing.
Yeah.
And you sort of need a support network, but you don't really have it. And I'm thrown into this complete alien culture, which I fell in love with very, very quickly. I adored Singapore, and I still do. My wife's Singaporean.
So you met her on that trip, did you?
Pardon?
You met her on that trip?
I met her. Yeah, I did. I met my wife she was a suit in BSB. Yeah,
Andy, one of the great lasting marriages. Saren, hello Saren, if you're listening. 2 kids and been married for.
No, I remember taking her out on a date, and all of the expats were going, "Did you just go out on a date with Sarah? You motherfucker!" and she was the best looking girl in the agency, and I managed to go out on a date with her. In fact, I remember our first date because I said at the end of the date, "Am I the kind of guy you consider going out with?" And she said, "No." And that's probably the best thing you can say to a man like me, because you go, "All right, well, I'm going to give
There's
this."
the gauntlet thrown.
That's the gauntlet. I'm going to give this a good go. No, I adore.
But you guys met up there, and then you came back here, got married. You've got 2 lovely kids, and you've been pretty much here since, right?
Yeah.
Apart from the advertising piece, you're also a guy who I would say, of all my friends, is probably the guy who has his finger, and always had, probably most on culture. You used to complain when I was here when we were friends back here in the late 90s, early 2000s, about how difficult it was to get hold of the comedy that we both love, and the latest shows.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your whole interest in. You're also a gamer. If anyone wants to know anything about what's going to happen next, Andy's the guy to ask, because I want to talk about that on this podcast.
I think I have this. I used to teach award school for many years. The first thing I'd say to every award school group was, you have to remain 17 years old, or let's say 11 years old. You have to try and keep that fucking wonder for the world that I think the world tries to beat out of you. And what I've tried to do for my whole life is keep that interest in everything, in everything that's new, and whether that's tech or comics or films, and fuck anyone who says you shouldn't be doing that at your age.
Yeah.
I think it's important as a creative to be constantly sucking in everything that's new and different and fun, wherever the fuck that comes from. And that can come from, you know, I've actually been influenced by fucking shows my kids watch. I think Adventure Time is one of the best shows on TV.
SpongeBob, brilliant.
SpongeBob is amazing. I think, you know, virtual reality, gaming, the more you suck in, the more beauty comes out when you actually need to produce something.
I have a question for you, which I think I've always wanted to find the answers, because I've never been able to get into gaming. I did the old Tomb Raider series back in the day. But, you know, they were...
It's so moved on from that.
I know it has, but back in the day they were pretty good. But I mean, I was just finding I was spending so much time that I don't have stuck behind these heads. Where do you find time to do? Like, are you up all night and then just have breakfast and go into work?
No,
Matchsticks in your eyes?
No, look, I mean, my wife absolutely despises the fact that I'm a gamer. I've always tried to make time for it, and I think when everyone's gone to bed and the house is quiet, I'll do 2 or 3 hours of whatever the big game happens to be, because I actually think gaming is actually far more important right now than movies are. I think movies have reached a point where they are dull, they're monotonous, they're based on what was important last year. I think gaming is the new frontier of creativity. There are games like The Last of Us, which if anyone listening to this hasn't played and has a PS4 should fucking play. They are really pushing the envelope with creativity and and how you can evoke emotions from the player. Emotions that I was amazed by how emotionally attached I was to characters in these games. And remember that you know, compared to a movie, which is, you know, an hour and a half, you're playing these games for over a period of, you know, a few weeks, sometimes maybe 20, 30 hours.
Yeah.
And you become enormously attached to these characters. And because the characters are so well written, and because so many writers from the movie industry have moved in to the gaming industry, the writing has got so much better, the empathy has got so much better, the storytelling has got so much better. I mean, gaming 10 years ago used to be a B-movie schlock, but now it's very, very intelligent and very beautiful. And I've been amazed by how moved I've been, by how shocked I've been, by how scared I've been. It's the most exciting medium right now. I'm not seeing it in the movies. I'm seeing it in games.
So where does it go? We're actually doing this podcast just as the new Oculus Rift. You have a funny story about that. Where does it all go from here? What's your prediction?
I will admit that, sadly, I set my alarm for 2:30 in the morning, and I actually ordered the Oculus Rift consumer version at about 1 minute past 3 a.m. in Australia, because I believe it's important. I believe it's important to see what people are going to do with it, and I've seen incredibly emotional demos and pieces and films that people have done, and I've seen a simulation of a man in an office in the 9/11 attacks as a piece of empathy, as a piece of history, to try and witness something. It shows the level of ideas that are coming through VR. What excites me is what it could do, for example, for kids who are in hospital who can't leave those beds. I would love to go to Disneyland and shoot VR 360 on all the Disneyland rides, and then actually start a company that allows children to experience Disneyland, because they won't be able to.
We had a 3D James Cameron driven thing happen about 8 years ago, which has kind of proved to be a little bit of a fad. I mean, there was 3D before, but
You're talking about 3D like IMAX.
I'm talking about, and also things like Avatar and stuff like that came out. But I mean, I guess they were precursors to this. This is not a fad, right?
No, I think there's a huge difference between 3D IMAX and VR. I mean, before movies started, there were tents in America where people would walk in and they would see a tray on a screen heading towards them and they would run screaming. We are at that level with VR. We are at the very, very birth of a medium that in the next 10, 20 years is going to become so fucking significant that it is going to be able to educate children in regions that are completely without education. It is going to allow you to listen to a lecture in Harvard when you happen to be in Somalia. It is going to allow you to run across a beach when you're without legs. It is going to allow you to fly a fucking F-15 like me when you'll never fly an F-15. It is allowing you to do these extraordinary things.
But one of the points I want to make just on that and playing devil's advocate is, right now we have the entire knowledge of the world in our pocket. There's a loneliness coupled with a connectedness that's kind of weird, where everybody is sort of staring down at their phones. We're not engaging, we're not talking as much. I mean, the idea that this new technology is going to drive us further apart from human interaction and into this sort of matrix-like environment surely must be a worry.
That's a very, very difficult question. Have we moved from a social society to an insular society? I think we only have to look to any street in any wherever you're listening to this podcast, walk out onto the street and see people looking at their phones. I mean, we are becoming distant from each other. I do agree with that, and I think one of the scariest things that I can see, and I can actually see it right here, right now, is couples sitting down together, but instead of communicating, they're looking at their phones. Technology has got between us. It absolutely has. But I do like to think that VR, and I think one of the reasons that Facebook invested so much money in Oculus is that Facebook realised very cleverly that what Facebook does is it's connected me to people that I went to school with, I work with. Yeah. It means that we're this society, but our connection is based on likes and little comments and little fucking I like that too. And so suddenly I'm connecting with people I work with in Singapore and New York and London. But I think what VR does, I truly believe that in 2 years I'll be able to go, Shawnee, where are you? I'm in Boston. All right, well, I'm in Sydney. Let's watch Apocalypse Now, right now. Yeah. And we will put on our headsets, and you will be an avatar, and I'll be an avatar. But your avatar will be you, and my avatar will be me, and we will sit and watch a movie that we love together. But with microphones, we'll be able to talk about that movie as if we were sitting in a cinema together. And I think that
it's like that book you're very fond of.
Yeah, Ready Player One. I mean, I think Ready Player One is a wonderful, wonderful book. Is it a slightly hysterical look at the dangers of VR and the fact that of the isolationism of VR? Yes, but I do think that it can connect people who are separated by distance. One of the worst things that's obviously happened moving to Australia is that I'm apart from my family and my sister and my parents, who I love very much, and obviously I have Skype to talk to them, but maybe the fact that we can sit down together in a virtual living room and hear each other and see each other and watch a program together is something that we all love. Maybe even home videos of us as kids and actually talk about those things.
The irony is, I suppose, back in the day, the dinner table became a thing of the past when we were growing up. Like, kids were running in, and there was no, the 50s and 60s, everyone sat down for dinner every night, and people, I guess it's a progression. The other dystopian element to this is the longer 200-year view, where do we all become robots, or do we all become attacked by robots? I mean, do you think first of all we'll have a chip in us in your lifetime?
Do I think we'll have a chip in
a brain sort of situation?
I think probably yes. I mean, I think that and if we want to get heavy, that what science fiction writers call the singularity is upon us. I think the singularity, which is basically the moment when AI becomes self-aware, and for all you fans of Terminator, self-awareness, and then everything went to shit. I think the singularity is within maybe 10, 15 years, and I think people like Stephen Hawking are very concerned about that because it's such an unknown quantity. What does that mean? What does that mean when a being becomes sentient, when a being becomes aware of what it is? I don't think we're fully... I think we're smashing into technology we don't quite understand. So in answer to the question, do I think we'll have microchips? I don't know. I mean, I'll give you an example. I have 2 beautiful kids. If someone said to me, and this sounds fucking terrible, but if a doctor said to me, we are going to put a little chip in your son and a little chip in your daughter, and it'll be painless, they'll never know, but what it means is if they're ever abducted, we'll know where they are and the fucking cops will get them, then I would go for it.
Right.
I really fucking would. And I think a parent...
Yeah.
What scares me the most is my son walking down a street and getting dragged into a panel van, and me not knowing where the fuck he is. Now, if a chip was in the back of his head, does that mean that... Should I be concerned about the chip in the back of his head, or the fact that it means that I can rescue him immediately? Is that hysterical? Is that wrong?
What if I said to you that in that future, every abductor would carve the chip out of his head the first thing they do and throw it in the...
Well, exactly. So the first thing that happens to my son is that gets cut out.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, we're now in hell.
I know.
No, so I don't know.
Bring it back to that point.
We went really dark.
We did. I'm trying to make it a little bit of a happy ending. Bringing it back to sort of a more happy maybe place. What do you think about the future for your son? So I'm talking the next 20 years.
That's a very, very difficult question. Jesus, dude. I mean, that's about as big as it gets.
No, like, are you optimistic or pessimistic?
No, I think I'm optimistic. I have a huge faith in the human race. I have a huge faith in humanity. I have a huge faith in what's decent as opposed to what's wrong. To quote Jurassic Park, life will find a way. I think goodness will find a way. I think humanity always does the decent thing. Well, I hope so.
That's a nice place to finish. I apologise for the noise. I think we started this about an hour ago and it was about half the decibels of what we're getting now. Sort of a nightclub has grown up around us here, so apologies if it's been tricky to listen, but I think the key thing I would take out of it is always stay a kid if you want to be creative. Andy Flemming, thank you very much for being on the Pie with Seaniebee.
It was a pleasure.
No worries, buddy.